This is the second interview for the Latah County Historical Society project about the League of Women Voters. Interview conducted by Nick Cousino on November 15th, 2017. What is your name?
Susan Ripley.
And how long have you lived in Moscow?
Continuously since '83, but I lived here before that a little bit too.
And how long have you been a member of the League of Women Voters?
Since 2010.
Okay, awesome. Was there anyone in particular who encouraged you to join, or was it more of an event or something that you decided on your own?
No, it was no one encouraged me. It was an organization I always looked at when I was younger and raising my children and so on. Janet Fisk, a member of the League, always sold peas and lentils at Christmas time. Little, like calico sacks, one filled with peas, one with lentils, and then it was put in this cardboard box, and it was a little Christmas gift thing. So I always bought those. I always bought those from the League of Women Voters from Janet Fisk. And I just that was the face of the League to me, was Janet. And when I look back, this is kind of funny, because when I look back, when I was in high school, I had an art class and we had to draw in our sketchbooks every week. And one of the pictures I drew was a suffragette. Not sure why. I look back at that sketchbook now and not sure why. So I think it was something that was always in my head. Mm-hmm. And at some point, just prior to joining, I had decided that I wasn't strong with a political party, but I was strong with politics in my head. And League of Women Voters is a good fit for someone who's politically active and not wanting to work with a particular party.
Excellent. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the peas and lentils, because in the materials I looked back in the archives, that was like the staple of the League of Women Voters all the way back to the 50s and 60s.
It was the fundraiser. It was their fundraiser that they had every year, and I just looked for that every year. And Janet Fisk was a known individual around town. She was very identifiable. She's, they kept the local characters, and I'll say that with quotes, but because she's someone that you would recognize all the time, and she always had this hat on. You'd recognize that hat, and she was just, you thought of the League of Women Voters when you saw her. It was just that person. And you thought of the peas and lentils, because I think she was like this person who I don't know if she started it, but she certainly kept it going for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So what would you say is probably the most important or the most impactful part of the League of Women Voters to you?
I think it's kind of threefold. One is registering people to vote. Mm-hmm. You see them out there registering people to vote, and that's important. Two is the speaker series that the League has to help inform voters so that the people understand issues, situations, whatever. There's so many things. And the third is the mock election that is held for the high school kids to get them feeling comfortable going into an election site. And we had our last mock election was just before the 2016 presidential race or election. I was working the actual polls at the election, and this young gal came up to me and she said, I am so glad I had that mock election. I feel so much better being here now. And that was like, yes. That was just, to know one person benefited from that, well, you hope more did, but just to know for a fact that that person benefited made it all worthwhile.
That's excellent.
So that's the three things, the threefold. The education with our speaker series, the voter registration, and a mock election to help take the fear out of the whole thing for high school students.
So one of the things that I ran across in the archives a lot were kind of published materials that the League of Women Voters would put out every now and again. A lot of, in particular, voter guides or informational pamphlets. Do you find that, because you mentioned the speaker series, do you kind of disseminate information via published works or more from like face-to-face talking to people?
I'd say both. I'd say we take advantage of whatever avenue. Prior to belonging to the League of Women Voters, the candidate forum that I always wanted to go to was the League of Women Voters. I thought it was the best one there was. They don't have like an agenda like the chamber would be like pro-business, or AARP would be for the old people and so on. And the League was just about wanting you to have an opportunity to find out who these candidates were. So there was the candidate forum that I always went to. But what I always looked for was that voter guide, because that had all the candidates listed in there, had a little bit about each of the candidates, so you knew something. And it was a document I always looked for. Okay, fast forward now. I'm League of Women Voters. Well, I, along with one other member, put together the last two voter guides. So I think it's a really worthwhile publication that we put out. However, we might be going digital now. We might be going to just a digital format where we can even ask more questions, because we don't have that constraint of having to pay for publishing, for having these things printed and so on.
There's a kind of a trend towards digitization. Other than what you just said, has that made a lot of changes in how you do things?
I think it's making changes. I don't think it has made a ton of changes at this point, but we're going in that direction because younger people, the millennials as they call them, and I hate titles. I hate putting labels on things, but the millennials seem to label themselves all the time, so I will use it. But they're digital. Their phone's out. Their phone is out and they're looking everything up. They're not looking for a book or a paper or I'm still looking at a paper or something, but they're not. So in order to, we're at the crossroads right now, because we have the people like me looking at paper. We have young people looking at digital. Well, right now those are coming together. And we're at the crossroads where we have to be working with both, but the digital will be the one that moves on, and the paper will fall off. So we're going there. We're not there. We're going there. I mean, we're at the crossroads. We're doing both. Doing both right now.
And going back to kind of the projects you've done. What would you say is probably the most popular project that you get the most response to from the community?
Our speaker series is incredibly well loved. Our candidate forum, this last one we had for a city election. Now we're talking just a city election where most people go ho-hum. There were like 200 people in the great room. They were falling off the rafters. Figuratively speaking, nobody fell, but they were hanging from everywhere. It was huge, and I think there's a couple of things. One is that like I said, we don't have an agenda. Two, people are realizing they need to take a little bit more active role in their government. So they're paying attention a little bit more. So, I think the speaker series is huge. Candidate forum is huge. And the mock election is a narrower audience. But the audience that receives that, I think, is just so engaged with it. So I think those are like the three big things that we do.
Excellent. Okay, so there's one thing that I found that was probably the most interesting to me personally, and it was about building consensus on topics. And back in the days, they would send out surveys to everybody, and each individual chapter would get them, and they'd be sent to the state, and then you'd have a state stance, and a city stance, and a national stance. Do you still do those sort of things today, or is it different in any way?
It's still done. I don't know if it's different than in the way they did it, but I think it's generally the same. But it's still done. The league will take a position on an issue, but they won't take a position on an issue until it's been studied. Mm-hmm. And that study, if the U.S. League, the League of Women Voters of the U.S., the one over the whole country, if they have a study that they want, there will be a group that will gather that information, and it'll be sent to all the states, and the states will send it down to the local leagues, of which Moscow is a local league, and then each of those leagues will look at the information, look up more information, do whatever, learn as much as they can, and then they will respond to the questions. And it will be by a consensus, not a majority, not a unanimous, a consensus, the general consensus of the people in the room. Mm-hmm. And then those answers will all be sent back to the U.S. League. Now, that same thing can happen with the state. The League of Women Voters of Idaho could have a study, and they would send it to the local leagues, who would do the same thing and send it back to the state. Or a local league can have a study, come to a consensus just within their league, and then that's their position. So that position, whoever has the study, that's whose position it is. So if the U.S. League does a study, it's the U.S. League's position. However, all league members, all the League of Women Voters of Idaho or the League of Women Voters of Moscow can use that position to lobby for whatever that issue is. So it still goes on, very popular, happening all the time. Yes.
Excellent. So I've heard from talking to a couple people that there has been a uptick in new people coming into the league in the recent couple of years. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said a little bit ago about people are realizing that they need to take a more active role in their government. Mm-hmm. We, the people of this country, got kind of, not everyone, but generally, they got kind of a little apathy about them and kind of just went off in a direction and let things happen. Well, all of a sudden we've got all the money in politics with our super PACs and everything, and we have gerrymandering. We have, when you're not watching the hen house, the fox is going to come in. Well, I think people were not paying attention to their government, and now a lot of things have happened, and they're going, whoa, when did that happen? So it's kind of a wake-up call now, and they need to, they realize they need to take a more active role in their government, and many people have chosen League of Women Voters as a group that they align to work on that. Plus, there's been we've gotten more members. There's also more organizations that have popped up, politically active organizations. So.
Excellent. Oh, okay. This is, so when I was talking to Dulce about how about some of the older things the league used to do, one of the things she brought up were the observer corps. Mm-hmm. Is there any push to do that again, or can you speak to that?
Yes, actually, it's something we're bringing back, which I didn't know a lot about what they did when they did it before, but since it was in September, we announced it at our Back to League night, and we got good response. People wanted to do it. Well, since that time, I've talked to a few people who actually were working on the Observer Corps back in the 70s, and it's what got them politically active. It got one lady to run for school board. It energized people. Well, yes, so we're bringing it back. We have a chair for the committee who's working on some of the guidelines and so on, and probably the beginning of the year we'll start attending some of the meetings and keep an eye on what's going on.
Excellent. I guess to just kind of wrap up, is there anything that you think that I've left out? Is there anything that you feel should be known?
Well, the number one most important thing to the League of Women Voters is nonpartisanship.
Mm-hmm.
In order to be taken seriously, you have to be nonpartisan, and that is if you read anything about the league, look on their websites and stuff. Nonpartisan is like the thing they're focused on above all else, and but it's kind of a hard thing, because if you know anything about these women who worked for decades to get the right to vote, they weren't just sitting down. They were pretty strong-willed, shall we say, radical women. They were pushing the envelope. So the League of Women Voters is looked at more like the envelope pushers, but they're not. They don't align with a party, and they don't align with candidates. They look at the issues. They want people to run. They want people to be active, to have their voice out there to the people who are representing them, and that's, I guess, probably the nutshell of it.
Mm-hmm. That was probably the thing that attracted me most to this project, was all the materials I read from day one, the commitment to nonpartisanship.
That is like the commitment. I don't care what you read, it's nonpartisan. In fact, someone said to me, there was something recently with someone who wouldn't be in a leadership position because of wanting to be partisan. Mm-hmm. And someone said to me, well, every time you say something, you say, we have to be nonpartisan. It's like that's that thing. It's like, if that doesn't come out of my mouth every time we get together, I don't know what does, Yeah. So it is important. It's really important to League, and it's really important for us to maintain that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Good luck with that project. Thanks for doing it.